Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Turn of the Year Pause series. Is that what I called it? I keep forgetting. So funny. Anyway, welcome to part 3. So, my dogs are very restless today. I do apologise if you suddenly hear a strange noise. It's either a dog snoring or I don't know what they're up to this morning. Anyway, let's begin. So, if you haven't done part 1 and part 2, don't panic. You're here now. So if you've got time, I invite you to download the workbook and go and do part 1 and part 2. But if you haven't, that's okay. You're here now, so stay here. So part 3 is an opportunity to release the stuff that we don't want to take with us from one year to the next. And we're just going to do this very gently. So this is no pushing stuff away, squishing down stuff that we think we ought to be better at. This is just allowing things to come to the surface that are things that it would be really nice if we didn't have to keep them. And then just give an opportunity. At the end, I'm going to do a neutral noticing release with you, which is just inviting the body to release patterns of held tension, which may or may not be associated with the things that you want to release. So it's very, very permissive. It's very what feels right for you. It's all about tuning into yourself. It's all about awareness, and it's to do with the mind-body connection. So it's very gentle, and it's just an invitation if that's helpful to you or not. So we're going to start by if you did part 1, you may have noticed in your review of the year that there were things that, tough times and things that you'd like to release, maybe some of the tension over. So often when we go through a period of stress, we end up with these kind of held patterns of tension, a bit like when you get to the traffic lights and you're in a hurry and the light goes red and then you're almost like pushing at the steering wheel, even though it's not going to get the light to change faster and it's not going to get you to your appointment on time. So we do this a lot, and often completely without realizing it. So the tension goes into the body. Typically the jaw gets tight, the neck gets tight, we get headaches, tightness around the eyes, the chest, sometimes the belly gets quite disturbed, and then we can get backache, all sorts of things. It can, end up in the oddest places in our bodies, and then we're like, what's wrong now? So this is just an opportunity to notice, and there's no diagnosis. This is really important. So there are patterns of thought or bodies of thought where it's like, well, tension in the neck means this, but that's not what I do. This is just an awareness practice. So what are the feelings, the states, the tension, the habits, the beliefs, the things that you've noticed or will notice during this episode that come up for you where you think, oh, I don't need that anymore? And then just an invitation to let that go. And usually or often or sometimes just the becoming aware of a habit, like, for example, self-doubt. Self-doubt's a habit, and listening to the voice that's pressurizing you, saying you ought to be better. These are habits that once we're aware of, then we immediately tend to start letting them go. But let's just be clear, letting go isn't a one-off thing. It's not a one-off thing. Personal growth is really messy. So we tend to go round in a spiral. And it's quite nice to think of the spiral gradually spiraling upwards. And sometimes it shoots upwards because we have this big leap in personal growth, and other times it just feels like we're going round and round. But you're not going round and round if you're noticing, because if you're noticing that you're going round and round, immediately that means you're spiraling upwards, because as soon as we notice things change. It's when we don't know, when we don't realize, that we get stuck going round and round in circles. So just noticing is huge, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to try and change. Try and be better. Definitely not. So this episode is not about adding to your get better at list. This is about letting go of your invisible getting better at list by noticing that you probably have one. Got it? Kind of? Well, let's just play. This is an invitation to pause at the turning of 2021 to 2022 Allow to come into awareness things that you no longer want in your life, habits, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and then just as they come to the surface, noticing them and then allowing them to go if they're ready to. And this is very much, because I work with the mind-body connection, this is very much about trusting yourself and your body. So at the end, we'll do a neutral notice practice, get out of the head into the body, and just allow the body to let anything go or not. So it's trusting the body. So when the thing is, we can get very judgmental. We think, well, I've got this terrible habit of self-doubt or whatever the habit is that you want to get rid of. And this is the problem. We want to get rid of things. We want to get rid of parts of ourselves. We want to bash ourselves into a better version, a tougher, more capable. And I just want to say, can we stop? Because bashing yourself to be other than you are is really harsh. It certainly didn't work for me. It's not how I work. So instead, I'm just going to invite you to notice when you're trying to push and try really hard and strive to be better. And this is the antidote to New Year's resolution. So instead of saying, I'm going to get fitter this year, you might want to try with I'm going to notice how movement and food and the way I feel and talk to myself about my body affects how fit I feel and look to myself, which is quite a different way of doing it, because one is coming from deep self-love and one is coming from needing to be better, different. So, should we give it a go? Okay. So if you did episode 1 and there's stuff from your messy journaling that you're like, yeah, I really, I know what I'm ready to release, then that's great. But if you don't have that, that's fine as well. You don't need to go off and do anything. You're here now. Let's do this. So I want you to just take a moment and just notice how overwhelmed you have felt during 2021. And if it feels like, oh my God, I've been ridiculously overwhelmed. I've put a lot of pressure on myself. My to-do list is never ending, but I'm still trying to get it finished. If you've got all of that kind of stuff coming up, if you're tending to push yourself really hard to get things done, and in doing so sacrificing your health, your ease, your relationships, because you're either not got time to meet with friends, or you're really snappy with your partner, or grumpy with the dog, or not really present with your children or your clients, if you're just struggling and pushing through overwhelm and it's hard work, then I invite you just to notice that and notice how that feels. And notice it would be really nice to have less of that. And if it would, then I invite you to just notice that. But know that the overwhelm is serving you in that, because it's unpleasant, it's like a course correction. So when overwhelm gets really bad to the extent where we're pretty much permanently in it and we just don't know it because we're so overwhelmed. So I know a lot of people who tell me, I'm not overwhelmed, I'm just really busy. And yet they're really struggling to find time for themselves. So you may or may not be overwhelmed. I'm not. This isn't a judgment. This is about you. What do you want? Do you want more clarity? Do you want more space to think? Do you want more space, time and energy for yourself? Do you sometimes wish you could just slow the world down and get off for a moment? So just notice what comes up for you. And then you can have an intention to release the need to keep pushing yourself so hard through overwhelm. Just having that intention, just noticing, how does that feel? And if it feels like, oh man, that'd be so good, Heidi, how do I do that? Then get hold of the 1 minute mark and start practicing neutral noticing for 1 minute every day. Start there. Or come and join one of my courses. Or contact me and ask about working one-to-one with me. Or do the unexpectedly lovely things practice on the hour every hour. There are all sorts of things that you can do, but all we're doing today is noticing. And if it feels horrible, like, oh my God, I've been treating myself so badly, notice that too. Because do you want that judgy mind? My mind gets super judgy. I don't like it. So at my best, I'm kind of talking back to myself. I don't want to listen to this rubbish. Whose side are you on anyway? Honestly, sometimes we would never talk to a friend the way we talk to ourselves sometimes. So if that's you, sometimes notice that too. Maybe that's something that you'd like to release. Just notice. You don't have to do anything. You have to make some grandiose commitment. Just notice, completely neutrally, how you feel in this moment. Maybe feeling your feet on the ground. Maybe allowing your belly to soften. Or not. Maybe allowing your shoulders to move away from your ears if they want to. And if they don't, that's okay. Just notice. Notice how you feel in this moment. And however you feel is however you feel, and that's okay. There's no need to try to change or achieve anything or do anything or even try to relax or release anything. Just be present to what comes up for you as I ask these questions. And if you want, you can journal them out. I don't want all this overwhelm anymore. It costs me this, it does this, I don't like it. You can journal that out. You can pause and journal that out now if you want. Whatever feels good to you, because this is all about you. And making 2022 such an unexpectedly lovely year for yourself. So, unfinished projects. Unfinished projects. So unfinished projects can weigh heavily on us for years. And sometimes we never actually drop them, even though they're 10 years old or 20 years old or 30 years old or whatever it is. Are there any unfinished projects you would like to say enough? Just notice that. Maybe pausing to journal them out, or just allowing the question to wash over you during the week. Unfinished projects. Are they still relevant? Are they still making you happy? Do you want to finish them? Because you could think of it this way. There will always be more projects to finish than can be finished. And that if you started a project and didn't finish it, that's okay. But trying to finish all of them, how's that working out for you? Is that making you happy? Unfinished projects. Unfinished books. I was talking to a very close, important friend of mine the other day who said her Kindle is loaded up with stuff that she wants to read, but she hasn't got time to read it. And I could just feel the pressure. And then I thought, what if we could turn that around? What if instead of feeling pressured by all the books we want to read, all the information we want to absorb, however good and however life-enhancing it might be, what if instead we said, there will always be more books on my Kindle than I have time to read. And that's a really good thing, because that means I always have something to read, and that there are always people writing things I want to hear that could make me happier or would be good to read. But I can't read it all, and that's okay. It's just opportunities. So if we can feel overwhelmed by opportunities, but if instead we just know that there will always be more, and that a yes to something means a no to something else. What do you want to say no to? Are there some opportunities you want to let go? Are there some books that you want to decide not to read? Where do you need to let yourself off the hook? Where's the backlog? Things that were relevant in the time and seem like a good idea at the time, but aren't now. What do you want to let go of? What's weighing heavily on you? Which brings us to the nagging of the endless to-dos. So, to-do lists. They're never ending. That's the point of them. Accepting that you cannot finish it, and that eventually some of it will just fall off because it can't be done, it doesn't need to be done, it's not relevant anymore, or you've given it to somebody else to do. That's going to happen. So your to-do list, does it feel good or does it feel heavy? How do you want it to feel? A to-do list is supposed to serve you. If it's not serving you, what do you want to do about it? Because it's your to-do list. You get to decide how it works for you. So if it feels heavy, do you want to change how you look at it? There's a to-do list episode. If you go back through the podcast, sorry, I don't know the number, but people found that very helpful. You might want to listen to that or not. Don't add it to your to-do list. And then there's the pressure of the invisible get better at list. Did you even know you had a get better at list? I bet you do. If you sat down and wrote down or even thought for a moment how many things you think you ought to improve about yourself, I bet you anything it's a pretty big list. But because it's invisible, unlike your to-do list, although there's probably also several invisible to-do lists as well, clogging up your brain and helping to overwhelm you. But if it's invisible, then it's below your awareness, and that's not a good place for a get better at list to be, because get better at lists are punishing, bashy, horrible things. That doesn't mean, obviously, because this is a personal development podcast, it doesn't mean I don't believe in personal development and improving ourselves. But I always go back to the Zen saying, you are both perfect and a work in progress. You are perfect and a work in progress. And the work in progress is letting go of the stuff that stops you from being your perfect self. So that would be the self-doubt that serves. This is interesting, isn't it? I think having a bit of respect for the things we think are terrible, because they have served us, and then we can thank them before they go. So self-doubt's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it stops us doing what we want to do, but actually it also protects us from doing things that might not be for us. It makes us question things. If we all walked around without any self-doubt at all, there'd be a lot of arrogant hubris going on, wouldn't there? So if you don't want the self-doubt, and I struggle with this all the time, because I'm constantly in my business pushing myself, or when I say pushing myself, I don't mean pushing myself to be better. I mean allowing myself to shine, getting my message out into the world that we can live without overwhelm, that success doesn't require the sacrificing of the very things that we strive so hard to get: ease, health, time to ourselves, energy, happiness, joy. We sacrifice all of those on the way to get them, and then we wonder why we're out of practice at having them. So self-doubt stops me from arrogantly assuming that I know what's better for you. I don't. I am learning constantly what's better for this version of myself. And I share my thoughts and insights and my knowledge to help you decide to blaze your own trail too, to be more you, the perfect you, without all of the gunk in the way, the stuff that holds you back from being in a state of empowered ease, that lovely, lovely state of empowered ease. So, the pressure of the invisible get better at list. Write down the get better at list, stare it in the face and see it for what it is. Notice how it makes you feel, and then decide to either reframe it. So for me, it would be, so say for example, there's something on there like Oh, the weightlifting one's hilarious for me. So, I want more muscle, so I ought to be doing kettlebells more often. And then I carry in great big trays of logs into the house every other day. And I've still got the lift weights on the list. Get better, get fitter, get stronger. Hilarious. So you can just notice where you're pressurizing yourself and what you want to keep, and reframe it in a way that works for you, that enhances your life. It's up to you. In the end, this is about, how do you want to feel? Well, I want to feel good. I want to feel happy. I want to feel playful and curious and energetic, and I want to be doing what I love. I might get better at this. Really doesn't help with that. So what's yours look like? I'd love to know. If you write it down and find this it's a real insight for you, please write to me at heidi@heidimarke.co.uk and let me know. I'd love to know. So, feelings of failure. Are there feelings of failure that you wish to release? Did you really fail? Or did you just experiment, take on a project, live, and then it didn't work out in the way that you expected? What did you learn? What did you enjoy on the way? What do you know now that you didn't know then? Feelings of sadness and grief. Quite a big one, but noticing them. Grief's a funny one, isn't it? Because if it's about death, then we get 2 weeks and then people expect us to snap out of it. And that's not my experience, is that it keeps coming back, and each time the waves change. And then there's the grief of losing a job or a house, all sorts of things. I often think that grief isn't really talked about, and good things give grief as well. So the grief of moving house is the excitement of moving house, and then the opposite side of that is the grief of moving house, because you lived in a house and you loved it, and you had neighbours and friends and a routine, and now you don't have that. You have a new one, and yes, you wanted that, but there's still sadness in letting go of the old, or there can be. So just noticing, is there kind of old grief that's ready to go, that you're not really grieving about, but it kind of feels a bit stuck, whatever that means to you. And then disappointment. Disappointment with others, disappointment with situations, disappointment with projects, disappointment with ourselves. Hurt, shame, the shoulds, the oughts. I shouldn't have done that. I ought not to have done that or said that. I ought not to think that. And the tough times. So the tough times are when all of these things collide, aren't they? And we push on through. And then things can kind of get stuck, where we get stuck in the problem solving, pushing, trying really hard to achieve, overriding signals from the body, not treating ourselves with much kindness. And sometimes it is an emergency, and other times we just get stuck in emergency mode. So I invite you to bring to your awareness anything that feels like, yeah, it'd be nice to let some of this go. And then as it comes to your awareness, just bring it to the awareness, shining a light on it. Often it starts to go all on its own if it's ready. And then on top of that, I invite you to spend a couple of minutes doing a neutral notice practice, a pause to release with me, or not. So you can't do this if you're driving, because I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and your attention is going to go into your body. So feeling your feet on the ground, allowing your eyes to close if you want to, because it's easier. Sending all of your attention down to your feet. Feel your feet on the ground. Allow your belly to soften if it wants to. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Just notice how you feel in this moment as you bring to mind stuff that you don't need anymore, that you're ready to release. Knowing that if it's ready to be released, it will go in its own time, just with your noticing it completely neutrally, and then with the intention to allow it to go, because you've become aware that you're carrying stuff you don't need anymore. And you can even, if you want to, bring a sense of gratitude for the habits, the thoughts, the feelings that helped you get through. But if you don't want them anymore, if it doesn't feel like they serve you anymore, habits that don't feel so helpful, then just bringing them to your awareness. And then moving your attention into the body and noticing anywhere in the body that feels like a physical sensation of the stuff you no longer want to carry. Or not. Just noticing, sweeping your attention through the body and noticing how you feel in this moment. And however you feel is however you feel. And that's okay. Just notice. It's enough to just notice. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to try to release or relax or push away or change or achieve anything. Just notice. Notice the stuff you're carrying that you wish to put down. And just allow it to slide off your shoulders or wherever it is, if it wants to. And you could just do this playfully. So if you feel like you've got a rucksack of rubbish that you've been carrying around, you could just playfully imagine it sliding to the floor. Just put it down for a moment and notice how it feels not to have to carry all of that stuff around. Or not. You can always pick it up again if you want. And just notice how you feel with this opportunity to become aware of stuff that you don't wish to carry anymore. And however you feel is however you feel. And that's okay. And I'll see you in the next episode, where we wrap all of this up and start to dream in your 2022.